Well, I had to make this video eventually. Phonk is definitely in mainstream now, millions of listeners on Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube playlists collect insane amount of views, phonk tracks appear in popular movies like John Wick. Yeah, you get the idea. The amount of subgenres that were born and reborn in the recent years is staggering. And obviously I can't talk and show each one of them, but I'll show the most prominent and popular ones. And because there are so many different subgenres in phonk and a lot of people argue about what can be considered phonk and what can't, I will put a label on the screen that will represent how true to its roots this subgenre is. Green if it sounds OG or close to origins, yellow if it's debatable, but we'll let it pass, and red which means it's barely phonk or phonk inspired. Got it? Let's begin. First of all, a history speedrun in order to explain origins of phonk. Phonk was born out of Memphis rap in early 90s. Memphis sound at the time had a dark, unsettling vibe that was usually created by time stretching and pitching down jazz and soul samples and recording muffled and dark acapellas on top of it. They used old samplers like Emu SP1200 or Boss DR5, which didn't really have a huge library of samples and didn't really sound that good. Plus, everything was recorded on cassette tapes, which added artifacts and noises to the recordings. And all the releases didn't go through labels, they were just recorded and handed from one hand to another via tape cassettes. So let's talk about the first track. In this particular case, I didn't use original drum machine samples, but I did my best to imitate this lo-fi sound. BPM is around 100 to 130, glacial pace I would say. And even though phonk as any hip-hop track is heavily based around sampling, in this case I decided to write some moody chords and show you how to do it. Just D sharp minor and A sharp minor as a chord basis, then copying lower notes and pasting them one octave lower, then copying them once again and pasting them once more, one more octave lower. Change note positioning and also play with velocities, then just add a melody on top of our chords. Copy melody into a separate MIDI channel and just change the instrument to a violin or a flute. And don't forget to detune both of the instruments to make them sound a little bit uneasy and disturbing. And now about processing. I specifically for this type of tracks use this plugin Tape Cassette a lot because it gives this lo-fi cassette type feeling to the overall sound. I use it on piano, on violin, adding pedal and erosion for additional distortion and EQing everything, cutting all the high end and a little bit of low end. Drums are very simple, just a stumpy kick, crispy snare, and hi-hats with additional groove. If you have Ableton 11, you have groove section, and you can put your grooves on your MIDI clips in order to have a unique sound to hi-hats, for example. The whole drum group just has some distortion on top of it, in this case trap drive distortion, free plugin, additional compression to make drums thicker, and controlling gain with utility. And then just adding some type of phonk type vocals, dark and distorted, something like this. As you can see, I use tape cassette on it as well. Maybe it's too much because I use tape cassette on basically every MIDI channel here and on the whole group, but still it's lo-fi vibe, so we're going for it. On the whole arrangement we have 2 additional tape cassettes, EQing everything all together and just compressing everything with master compressor like Kotelnikov, using threshold and makeup knob to get to the perfect volume and the sound that we want. Oh, and spooky effects like evil laughs and gun sounds for extra edge. Out of Memphis rap scene were born a lot of great artists, producers and subgenres. Even though a lot of popular modern producers were inspired by Memphis sound, they definitely moved into more trap-like sound, while there was one specific clan which kept old dark Memphis vibe more than the others. In 2008, a man by the name Space Ghost Perp started bringing old Memphis sound to the mainstream. He created Rider Clan, which became one of the most influential hip-hop collectives perspectives in later 2000s, and most of hip-hop connoisseurs believe that Space Ghost Perp created the word funk, which described the style of music he and his colleagues were making. They inspired even fresher scene of producers and artists, and in 2014 a label Doom Shop Records was created. People started calling their music Memphis Revival, because, well, they sounded like old school Memphis. And later, after worldwide spread of dark lo-fi-like muffled hip-hop production, a new wave of funk subgenres were born. And because of such wide variety of subgenres, old style and chill funk started to be known as rare funk. So in some way, because the beat that I showed you isn't using original drum machines and isn't recorded in 90s, obviously, it should be called rare funk or Memphis Revival rather than true Memphis Original. But to be honest, Memphis Revival is a little bit different, so it's closer to rare funk. The more you know. Before we go any further, I should definitely say that even though funk is considered usually dark and moody, there are still different vibes to it. Some of them I even can't call dark, it's kinda chill and not spooky at all, like, you know, chill funk, for example. It stays pretty true to its origins and sampling soul and jazz samples and pitching them down, but still staying in the chill spot instead of going dark. Imagine like Lo-Fi Girl instead of studying would make funk. That's what it would sound like. BPM between 120 and 140, still not breaking the speed limit. For this one I chose a soul synth sample, which I pitched down. And it already sounds nice, so we won't go too complicated on this one. Adding drums like smooth kick, warm snare, accompanied by nice percussion and triangle, some hi-hats with nice groove. I added tape cassette on the whole drum group as well to add some warmth to the sounds of drums. Multiband dynamics just to increase the high end and low end of the sound and just decrease the mid-range a little bit. And some vocals that I chopped up a little bit. Added 808 in the same scale as our synth loop, so it's D sharp minor. And on the whole group I just have some compression to sidechain the kick that we use here, EQing everything together and compressing as well with our master compressor as on the previous track, and all together. You probably thought, well, chill funk can be called lo-fi funk in a way. That's where you're wrong, because it's a completely different subgenre. We are back at the creepy territory, and when you thought audio can't get any worse, I prove you wrong. Lo-fi funk intentionally makes sounds distorted and compressed, not because of technical disadvantage like in 90s, but because we can make a sound even worse and distorted. Here we can have fun with tempo and picking anything between 140 and 170 BPM, picking a creepy piano sample from a horror movie or theatric play, something like this one. And pitching it down even further, like 12 semitones down. Adding drums, punching kick, snappy snare, crisp hi-hats, and distorted and angry 808 bass. You can remove your kick, the 808 will take its place, but I will use them both. After that, adding a cappella and chopping it even more than the previous one. And on the whole chain we have the compressor sidechaining our bass because we use it as our kick drum in this case. You don't need to do that, you can just sidechain your kick. Using EQ8 to get this toaster sound to remove all the high end and low end. Then using Echo Boy on the telephone preset, you can go to the style, use the telephone preset here, get feedback to the minimum, echo time to the minimum, and just play with dry mix knob. And you will get this muffled, like toaster lo-fi sound. Adding tape cassette on top of it for even more, I don't know, fun. And compressing it all together the same way with Kotelnikov. And here you go. Alright, we are entering a debatable territory, and honestly, I would say it's my favorite subgenre. You know, I talk about atmospheric stuff on this channel quite a bit, so I just think that's an interesting twist on the funk genre itself. Going back to slower tempos like 120 to 140 BPM will work out here. I decided to stay by piano as a main instrument here, use my Lap's piano for this, writing some chords and layering it with a pad, E minor, B minor, A minor, and E minor once again. Of course, adding reverb like Valhalla Supermassive presets from the Reverb's large section. And the drone that I made here is just the recorded tail over reverb of these chords, exactly these chords. Then I just modified these chords to add a melody above with these notes. Then using our usual trick, put the middle notes 1 octave above, creating a melody out of these higher notes, and just separating a couple of notes in between to give more melodic touch to your chords. The same thing with moving notes a little slightly to the right to make them feel more natural. The bass here is just a Serum Reese bass that I showed in a couple of my videos, a really simple one, with hyperdimension a little bit and EQing just in the middle, but mostly just 2 saw waves. EQing it heavily just to have this subby growl from the bass, and using compressor to sidechain a kick. Drums are just kick, snare and hi-hats, but in this case you can get additional reverb to the snare, as you can see here with Valhalla delay, and to hi-hats some just standard reverb from Ableton, EQing it, also adding unique distortion plugin like Thermal to the whole drums group, like Club Clipper for example preset. It will create thick and bright drum sound. Compressing drums with glue compressor and for additional drum thickness. And now I can talk a little bit more about vocals. First of all, yes, I used the same vocals in each example track, but only for demonstration purposes, cause you know, vocals can be an instrument itself, so you should find a better sounding a cappella for your track. But now more about vocal processing. What if you wanted to record your own a cappella for funk, for copyright purposes of course? This is how your processing chain will probably look like. Some EQing to highlight mid-range of your voice, using amp or any other way to distort your voice, make it more bassy, using Echo Boy with zero delay and telephone preset, so it would sound like you recorded yourself on an Xbox headset microphone, a little reverb to add room and space to your sound, and utility to control your gain, as usual. You may also have more accurate EQing to make your voice pop in the mix, and that's it. Adding these processed vocals to the track, and here we have a result of wave funk. And now we head to the internet classic. Get your cowbells ready for this one. But can we really consider this one as funk? Well, it's hard to call this subgenre funk for a couple of reasons. It's more aggressive rather than spooky and dark, it's much faster, somewhere between 150 and 180 BPM, and it's taken more hardstyle music elements rather than funk origins. But who cares, people still call it funk, and for the bigger audience it is the definition of funk. And cowbells, what about them? For a larger audience, cowbells equals funk. And yeah, we can hear the original 808 cowbell sample in the Memphis tracks in early 90s, but the thing is, cowbell was just one of the percussion samples available on the drum machines at that time. But more prominent and articulated popularity this sound still owes to funk genre. So you can use cowbell or not. Do whatever you want. Just know that funk can exist without cowbells. So back to the drift funk. BPM is at 180 and we're starting with cowbell melody. Writing in C major for simplicity and get a 4-bar loop like this. 808 bass is heavy and aggressive with additional pedal to add more distortion to the sound. Write in the same C major, looking at your melody and try to play off it. Drums are short, punchy and aggressive. Emphasize snares with additional distortion and layer them up. Try redux and overdrive for crisp high-end. No groove for hi-hats, they're just slamming and sometimes they go faster. Vocals are raw with no processing, just chopped up a bit. Acapella adds a rhythmic element to the track but just sits at the back of the mix, supporting everything else. The whole group can be additionally distorted with thermal that I showed you already, but not too much. Leave some headroom for later. Use multiband compression to increase low end and high end, but add more low end because we need more bass. And then compressing as usual, and we get this thing. Get your eardrums ready to be destroyed because we are making drift funk but for insane people, or aggressive funk. To demonstrate my point, I just took the previous drift funk block and modified it. Now we are at BPM Penthouse. Here you can meet like 200 BPM breakcore and speedcore kits, 200 BPM on the board, adding more distortion for the drums, layering kicks with additional kicks, doing the same thing with snares. Bass is even more distorted on the fuzz option, sidechaining kick to the whole group, adding even more thermal on the entire group with vaporwave preset, for example, using multiband dynamics to increase the low end and high end, using additional pedal on the distortion option, compress it once again and you get an ultimate distorted mess called aggressive funk. Alright, let's chill out for a second, drink some water, meditate, calm your mind. Alright, we good? What's next? Oh. House funk or pop funk or memeable funk or TikTok funk is the most popular subgenre and has a lot of variety, but still it has a lot of similarities with drift funk. Tempo is somewhere between 125 150. Same idea with cowbell melody, but a little bit more chill. We are having pauses now. Now layered with another cowbell melody. This one has a long reverb, which makes it more an atmospheric layer for the main melody. You can add plucky bass to emphasize melody even more, something like this. And 808 bass pattern, playing off our main melody like an aggressive funk, like in drift funk, and kinda galloping in a way. Drums are simple as ever, just kick, snare, 4 to the floor, house beat, you know this drill. Layering 2 kicks all together, as you can see I experimented with different kicks. Adding claps to the kicks in between, layering claps with the snare, a lot of snares, and adding hi-hats in between. And vocal chain I already showed you, just the same processing with Echo Boy and Amplitude and EQ8, toaster lo-fi processing. And in here I specifically want to talk about mastering. because this type of music is bass heavy and you might encounter problems that sidechaining isn't enough. Your track might feel weak, and that means that your balances are off. A better option here will be just to lower entire melody group, as you can see, like 6.5 decibels here, and let your drums shine, because drums are the powerhouse in this genre, especially kick and bass, you know. And in the mastering chain you can add even more bass, as I showed you with multiband dynamics. And now I would say we are crossing the border of close to funk music and entering gimmicky lands of funk-inspired subgenres. I have a sweet spot in my heart for jungle funk, but not because of funk, but because of jungle. See, it's kinda weird that just adding Memphis a cappella to a certain music genre for some reason makes it insert genre funk, but who am I to judge? Sometimes acapellas or cowbell melodies lay well on the D&B and jungle tracks. BPM 160 to 180, usual D&B stuff, adding ethereal vital pads from my 90s jungle tutorial, link in the description, writing chords in C minor, layering first pad with another pad in C minor as well, adding bass layer with the same notes but 1 octave lower. The bass is the simple Reese bass that I showed you, some EQing to the bass. Then just taking a couple of breaks that I found here, just controlling the gain and using breaks kinda as 2 layers, layering those breaks with additional kick player to add more pumpy feeling to the entire track. The same telephone processing on vocals, and the only thing on entire group, just some sidechain compression for a kick. You can also render your pads in an audio channel and change their pitch as well, around 12 semitones, similar to Dark Memphis principles of production. Leveling it all together, and here we go. So what's next? Let me see. So continuing with funny gimmicky stuff, hyperphonk, yeah, it exists. Taking usual sampling techniques from hyperpop, using cute plugs and sounds, sweet and weird synths, and generally being a sinner. You can use loops or write chords yourself, like I did for example. First layer of synth chords in A sharp major, layer like this. Then adding another layer with similar chords. Adding a simple arpeggio in the same A sharp major. And just adding some pluck melody on top. Adding trap drums on top, like usual in hyperphonk, just using snare and hi-hats and really punchy kick to break it all up. On the snare and hi-hat section I used thermal distortion for additional crispness on top, and actually kick is layered, there are 2 kicks in here. The main melody group is something like this. Chopping our acapella aggressively and adding some reverb on top with just simple EQing that I showed you before. Layering like video game SFX and goofy noises can help. using compressor for sidechaining here as well, some multiband dynamics to emphasize high end and low end as usual, some EQing just to lower a little bit of mid-range down, and just overall our favorite compressor. Another thing you can do, you can add stutters to your overall mix in hyperphonk. You can use Shaperbox to add these kind of stutters. And that's what we've got. I wanted to finish up with something least phonk-like to show how far actually the genre went and how unpredictable it kinda is now. So here is phonktronica, or EDM funk, or electronic funk, and this genre is so wide-ranged and doesn't even have a certain scope. Generally this type of music is just EDM that might take certain elements from funk, like cowbell melodies or Memphis acapellas. Well, that's why it's more funk-inspired. So this turned out to be a fusion of house funk, a house drum pattern, funk acapella, aggressive synths, cute plugs, dream keys and Reese bass. Clearly just a huge mashup of everything all together, but it has some unique characters and ideas and, you know. So finally, 10 subgenres later, here we are. This video was pretty tedious to make, and I hope you enjoyed it. Comment your favorite funk subgenre, count how many times I said the word funk in this video, what you liked and what you didn't like, and good luck on making your own sound. Bye.